Why are society's high expectations causing young adults to induce in self-harm? Around 21% of children ages 9 to 17 have a mental illness. Stress from social activities within various settings can cause psychological dysfunction inside the brain of someone with any mental condition. A study done by Lancaster University interviewed patients who have self-harmed in the past, all of whom regarded the actions as a coping mechanism for their chaotic emotional states. 9 out of 10 of these patients had a serious mental condition. But what conditions are causing teens to harm themselves? Borderline personality disorder is an illness that causes the brain to lack control over one's emotions, which leads to reckless behavior. With teens being pushed to excel in school and be outgoing young adults, they become overstressed from what they are expected to achieve. Ultimately, those with BPD rapidly change their mental state and cannot bear the physical pain. Self-harm becomes the only option that calms them down. Anxiety is another illness that affects many teens around the world with symptoms such as indecisiveness and perfectionism. This condition is difficult to control in public environments because teens with anxiety often avoid large groups. Saying or doing anything out of place in these situations causes total embarrassment for anxious teens because they think as though every action they do is judged by others. Anxiety causes teens to stress over every action done and sentence said, and it makes them feel out of place. Self-harm is then done as a way of coping with the judgment of their own actions. Depression is a condition that affects about 11% of those 18 or younger. It is one of the leading causes of self-harm around the world. While teens may realize they are depressed, they discuss it with their parents. However, they refuse to treat their children. With parents assuming it is a call for attention, teens do not get the psychological treatment they need, which leads to worse emotional disorder. As their parents neglect them and their emotional state goes haywire, teens feel as though self-harm is the only option. Madison Holler was a track runner from the University of Pennsylvania who committed suicide in January 2014. During her sophomore year, she was said to be depressed and checked into treatment centers for self-harm. At the bare end of it all, Madison maintained a near-perfect GPA at an Ivy League school and became a track star in her first 2 years. But her whole life she pushed to be the best, and it ultimately became part of her lifestyle. With the workload at school and pressure to always be perfect, Madison could not handle the stress and ended up taking her own life. Why are the amount of teens who self-harm and suicides increasing every year? It's because of how distant those with these conditions become when they cannot refer to a loved one for help. A feeling of neglect transforms into self-discipline as teens turn to actions such as cutting and burning.
It's when I feel so much anger that I can't express. It's when I feel injustice and like I'm being stifled, like I'm trapped. And there's no way of me safely expressing that feeling without making things worse. But for me, it's when the people around me, people who I'm very close to, say things that are just cruel and unnecessary. I feel worthless, and I feel like I'm being physically ripped apart until I'm nothing. I think the people close to me, certain people close to me, have that power over me, and I wish they didn't, but I feel like every word just tears me apart a little bit more. So I think the self-harm in a way is like tearing myself apart. It's like this misplaced anger, and I want to aim anger at somebody else, but I can't, and I aim it at myself instead, and it's a punishment because I feel so useless and worthless, and it's just a very complicated situation.
Family members should be those who teens with mental conditions should feel accepted with, because they are the closest to them. But the open world is where most teens tend to struggle being part of society's norm. As we analyze the book Culture of Cruelty, we learn that for young boys, the idea of fitting in through athletics takes a toll on how they create social groups amongst friends and how they develop into social young adults. If a boy is an introvert and keeps his physical ability to himself, he's seen as an outcast because being athletic is expected in today's world, especially in American culture. As these kids get older, they are expected to be these outgoing, brilliant students that participate in clubs, sports, and other extracurriculars. But those struggling to control their unbalanced minds prevents them from doing so. Teens with any mental illness will always be portrayed as different because they don't act and behave like everyone else. That is why their only option is to physically harm their bodies, because they are ashamed of themselves for not being accepted. That should never be the case. We live in a world where everyone is connected by technology and social media, yet the average person lacks the motivation to empathize with those around them. It's clear that we need to become more aware of those with BPD, anxiety, and depression because they are too scared to talk about their hardships. After discussing the concept of virtue ethics, we learned that it is our duty to help each other in order to achieve complete happiness. We must be virtuous and help those with mental illnesses by talking to them in order to fully understand what they are going through. Teens need someone to speak to in order to regain any acceptance in society because they will begin to feel and think like everybody else. If it becomes easier for teens to open up about their conditions, then the amount of self-harm done will decrease, and the future will be filled with adults that are confident about who they truly are.